AI has made it possible for a non-developer to spin up a functional internal tool in an afternoon. So why pay hundreds of dollars a month for software that only does 80% of what you need? The answer isn't as obvious as you'd think, and the hidden costs of the wrong choice can really mess up an e-commerce business. Welcome to the Ecommerce Finance Podcast. I'm Stephen Brown with Ledger Gurus. Today I have Stacy Walker, Director of Growth here at Ledger Gurus, and we're going to discuss build or buy. Is it cheaper to vibe code with AI or use SaaS? Stacy, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Stephen.
In our previous episode, we talked a little bit about AI costs. And along that line, I want to talk about vibe coding because it seems like everybody's talking about it. And there's all this conversation around the death of software. And we're all just going to build our own tools. And all the SaaS companies can go away and we'll just send all that money to OpenAI and Anthropic.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
Yeah, I want to see how that works out.
Me too. So I want to explore this because I think with e-commerce businesses, they're very technically savvy. They're doing a lot of using a lot of technology, and I'm hearing about a lot of operators who are vibe coding apps and believing that it is the answer to all their problems.
Yeah.
What do you think, Stacy? Are you going to go vibe code all your stack? Going to get rid of your CRM and just build your own?
No, I don't see a world where it's going to work. I just don't. There's too many things that change too often. I don't see how it's going to happen. Talk me out of it, though. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, let's talk to the implications of building software and maybe end up on where it might make sense and where it doesn't.
Okay.
As a little background, I spent 20 years in enterprise software. So I feel like I can talk about this from experience. I worked for software companies from 1997 to 2016, including a Fortune 500 and a couple of publicly traded companies. So I've been around building software for a long time. And obviously this changes in the age of AI. Like I was not a great software developer. I got into other aspects of the software industry, but I look at AI tools and I'm like, hey, I might have been a half decent software developer because I'm pretty good with the logic and how things should work. But I was always struggled with the syntax and which function do I do this and how to use this. It was not my forte. And so I can see why people are like, I can do it. I can, and I've built some stuff now with AI tools and I'm like, man, I can build things and it's awesome. But easier said than done.
Yeah, for real. Totally. So tell me what you see the most with people vibe coding. I'm curious in your role what you're seeing, and then I'll tell you what I'm seeing in mine.
I'm hearing a lot of stuff. I'm hearing people that are like, I want to build my own inventory management system.
That's what I'm seeing.
Or they're saying, I'm going to go replace that Shopify plugin. Or, and that's mostly in the e-commerce space. I haven't heard anybody say they're going to replace Shopify or like a Klaviyo, one of these big systems. But I would consider an inventory management system a pretty serious system. I know in the accounting space, there's conversations around, oh, could I vibe code my own accounting software because all these accounting software vendors are terrible and I'm just going to build my own. And that's what caused me to want to have this conversation because I'm like, be careful.
Yeah.
You might not know what you're getting into.
Yeah. So what do you think the implications are? So I'm thinking about inventory management systems that I'm hearing that people are trying to vibe code. But you brought up something that I'm curious about. You said they're dropping plugins on Shopify and building their own. So are there security issues with that though?
There's a number of issues and maybe we should walk through those, security being one of them.
Okay, let's do it.
So I would do a callback to our previous episode first, in that depending on what you're building and how much you're using AI in your software, one of the things you got to think about is tokens and subscriptions and how much consumption that is, or what is the cost of building that software. As you and I talked about previously, there are hard costs that are going into AI software that you and I believe are going to become a bigger issue. So first is, how much is it going to cost to build that software? Right now, it's not too expensive, but I think as you're getting into the Cloud Code and the other tools, those costs are starting to become usage based. And so you got to think about how much is it going to actually cost to build that.
Yeah. Yeah. And how much is it gonna cost to keep it running, right? What happens when
That's
you
my
break
that yeah,
something?
that's the second point, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the times people think about software and they're like, I build this cool app, but software is not a one and done thing. It is a living, breathing thing that you're constantly changing. You'll be like, oh, I need to fix this, or I need this new feature. It's constantly evolving. So it's more than that upfront cost, but there's the ongoing maintenance cost of software, which is why there's subscription fees, why even before you had these maintenance fees on software is because you're the vendors were constantly fixing and updating the software, and you need to think about what are the ongoing costs of updating that software.
So I think about, like, some of the softwares that we know some of our clients are using. So think about maybe a sales tax software
Hmm.
that people say, "Oh, I just set it and forget it. I don't think about it again." But we know that things break. There's very few things. Like, I can't think of anything in our ecosystem that we can set it and forget it as far as software is concerned. So who is so confident with their vibe coding that they feel like they can set it and forget it?
Yeah, I don't know. I would hope people aren't, and that's the first consideration. So APIs change if you're connecting it to Shopify or Amazon or whatever platform. Most software doesn't live in isolation anymore.
Yeah.
It's usually connecting to other systems. And so you got to consider that APIs are going to change. There's going to be features you're going to want to add to your tool. And so I think you have to think a little bit about how much am I willing to invest to maintain this software.
Yeah, I agree.
Along
And
that line, I think there's another thing, and that's the builder conundrum.
what is the builder conundrum?
Not everybody's going to vibe code. Have you vibe code anything,
No.
Stacy?
No, definitely not.
Shame on you.
I
Where
know.
how do you even wake up in the morning and look at yourself in the mirror?
I have other people that do it, I don't have to.
But I don't know, when you go to, like, conferences or listen to any podcast, do you feel like, "Oh my gosh, I should be vibe coding, like, everybody seems to be talking about this."
No, because I feel like it's going to I don't feel like it can be successful long term, and so I'm not putting my efforts there.
Maybe as a builder, somebody who's built software, I feel this guilt, like, I'm not vibe coding enough. I have the
It's you, it's
skills.
not me.
Okay, I have vibe coding guilt. I'm like, "I should be building more software. This is what I did for 20 years. Why am I not building more software?" Uh, Not everybody's gonna build. There is a skill set to building software, whether you're using old school integrated development environments, no code applications. There's kind of an understanding of underlying logic and architectures that you have to build or that you have to develop for yourself. And so I think this idea that everybody's going to be a software builder is a little bit extreme. Now, I think it'll be easier to create no code applications, but like full blown applications that are integrating with an API, has a backend database, a system of record. That's not going to be everybody. So let's say you go out and decide to build one of those things, or you have somebody in your team that is the builder. That person is now the maintainer of the software. What happens if that person decides to leave? Who's going to maintain that critical software that you built? Or if you're like the owner, like I'm just going to do it myself. Like, are you now a slave to that software? Like you got to like constantly update it. And so the builder conundrum is something where custom software's been around forever. Like, it's not like companies couldn't build their own software. It's just gotten a lot easier. But the builder conundrum doesn't go away. You're still going to need the person, the expert who understands that software to maintain it and or bring in other people to maintain it. So I think that's something that people have to consider.
Does the vibe coded software always work?
Um, Software breaks all the time. Like when I was building software, we're constantly updating it. You'd find bugs, like I said, things would change. Like software is never static, and so you've got to be constantly updating it. Even if you're not adding features, there's something that you've got to do to keep it maintained and up to date.
And does the builder always even know what they need to do? Can they always tell if something's not working, why it's not working?
Hopefully, I mean, in the age of AI, I'm hopeful that troubleshooting is easier. I know
Okay.
when I've built some stuff, it's like way easier, and you can be like, "Hey, this isn't working." But I find that because I have a software background, I know how to talk using software terms. I can very much say, "Hey, do this thing." I think with no code software, that's a little bit different because you're building on top of no code platforms.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can do things in Claude and it's probably going to get better. But again, you're going to have to understand how to build things in Claude and how those artifacts work and whatnot, or
Yeah.
whatever it is your AI tool of choice.
Yeah.
So that's
Okay.
problem number
That's
one, the
interesting.
builder conundrum. You're going to have somebody maintain it, and what happens if that somebody leaves?
Yeah.
Versus like a SaaS tool, like that's their problem to solve. To me, it's the analogy of outsourced accounting, which we do, versus in-house, right?
Yeah.
Outsource, if somebody leaves us, it's our problem to solve. They're paying us to solve a problem.
Right.
Uh, and if the person who was supporting our customer leaves, we have to figure out a solution. Same thing with custom grown software. You have to figure out how to maintain that. The software vendors will do that for you.
If you're building your own, you have to be able to know exactly what you want the software to do, and you have to document exactly what the requirements are, right? And if another brand, so if it's a SaaS product, they're doing all of that. So a lot of the heavy lifting, I would say, falls on them. Something breaks, going to them.
Yeah. Now, the pro to vibe coding is you can do whatever you want. You don't have to wait for the software vendor to build something because there's always gaps. You're always like, oh, I really would like it to do this. And maybe you build a relationship with the vendor and you're able to get your request onto their backlog and onto their roadmap and they'll build it for you. The upside of vibe coding is you get to build whatever you want whenever you want. You can just go ahead and build. And so that is a pro to building your own is you get to control what's in the product and if you need something, you can go build it.
And if you go build it, hopefully you have your process so well aligned that you don't miss any steps in the building.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you're either going to be good at building vibe coded software or you're not. And you'll know that pretty quickly. I think where it's going to get tricky is those that can build something and they're not thinking about some of the other issues that goes into software.
So, like security.
Let's talk about security, right? Uh, I actually worked on not just software, but information security software. There's a lot of vulnerabilities in software. There is a thesis that vibe coded software, that AI is going to build perfect software. I don't know if I believe that. I think it'll build better, but I still think there's going to be um, potential bugs, security vulnerabilities that will be created that'll need to go back and be remediated. So, how do you know that your software is secure? The other thing is when you're interacting with other systems, you have to think about the authentication. You have to think about how you're using API keys. You're going to have to think about what type of data is in your system. Is it secure? Is this information that contains customer data or is it software that's just solving a generic problem where the data is not really sensitive? Where is that software hosted? How is exposed is it? Can other people get to it? I highly doubt that people are going to vibe code desktop software. They're probably going to be vibe coding SaaS software.
Yeah.
So what are the controls and the security around that software? These are all things that we had to think about in enterprise software. Um, are you going to think about it? Or are you just going to chase features?
Yeah. Exactly. So, Stephen, tell me, like, what about compliance? If I'm vibe coding something, what should I be considering?
There are a lot of regulations around sensitive information. This is hand in hand with security, but like if you're handling credit cards, customer records, there are all sorts of things that you're supposed to be compliant with. And you may not even realize those things. A good software company, hopefully your vendors are good, they're going to think about those things. But you could find yourself, especially if your software was not handling that information correctly, you could find yourself with a big lawsuit and or regulators that come down and cause all sorts of nightmares for you. So that's the other thing around compliance. There's all sorts of laws around the handling of information that you need to be considering. So that's a big flag is what's in your software. Are you handling any sort of customer information and any sort of payment information? Huge flag. Like that stuff has to be really uh, handled right.
Has to be locked down for sure. So, do you feel like there's ever a time when vibe coding, building your own system makes sense?
I think so. Let's take the example of Shopify plugins. Some of these plugins are just basic features that nobody else is solving. And really, they should just be a part of a bigger piece of software, but they haven't been absorbed into a bigger piece of software, or the bigger software suites haven't done that. So, that could be a good example. Another example could be I've got a problem that nobody's solving. We have built some software here at Ledger Gurus that just we couldn't find an answer. And I spent literally some years trying to find solutions and I just couldn't find it. So finally we just decided to build our own.
Yeah.
Um, I think if the scope is narrow and somewhat stable, it makes sense. If you're building something complex, something like a system of record, I would be cautious because you may not realize what you're getting into. The other thing I think about is, are you a software company or are you a seller of widgets, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do think you're going to see some people have success building their own software. But I'll give you a good example. You and I were at a conference a little while ago,
Yep.
and one of the vendors was in a panel about AI software and it had a lot of developers. He was talking, they decided to replace a tool with something they built internally. And he was like, it ended up being more expensive. He's
Oh,
like,
wow, really?
yeah, because I think when you get into tokens and you get into the cost of building, the cost of maintaining, he was just
Yeah.
like, he didn't really get into the details, but I think it's all those things that I'm talking about. That stuff adds up. And so I think you have to be really thoughtful about is especially when you're trying to replace software, is it really cheaper?
Yeah.
Now, if nobody's solving that problem, the answer might be like, it might make sense. But if you're like, hey, I'm going to do it better than XYZ, that Shopify plugin, maybe you will. Or maybe that was a really good price that you didn't realize.
Yeah.
And heaven
Yeah.
forbid, don't go try and build your own Shopify or your own Klaviyo. You're asking for trouble.
Without a doubt. I was talking to somebody a couple days ago at another conference that he mentioned that he had vibe coded a whole program for his firm, and he did it solely to think through every single piece of the process, and then he handed that over to his developer and said, "This is exactly what I need it to do," because then they could think of everything he hadn't thought of, right? The security, the compliance, all of those things, and he felt like it was a great use of his time because he knew exactly what he wanted once he had gone through that process. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, I think it could make sense, if there's nothing out there. So part of
Yeah,
what I think about is the tool internal? No solution exists. Do you have that technical continuity? So whoever's building it's going to be around, or you can easily replace them. The scope is somewhat narrow, um, and the cost differential, all the costs. I mean, this is where we think about as accountants and CFOs is like not just that subscription cost. You're like, well, I don't have to pay that subscription. Yeah, but maybe you're paying a dude that's way more per month to maintain that software
yeah.
or a dudette, right? And you don't want to be gender biased. It could be anybody could build that. Um, on the other side, there's I think some flags where I would just be like, you really should consider a SaaS tool.
Okay, so
Eh,
let's talk about that. I am naturally a DIYer. I enjoy
mhm.
process. But there are things where I'm like, it's not worth the opportunity cost. It's not worth my time. It's not worth my money to try and figure this out. This is a job for a professional. So when do you think that's the case with this?
So, coming from our world, I would say number one, is it touching anything money, any sort of credit card records? I'd probably say don't do that. Um, if it is customer facing, you better be darn sure about its reliability, about its usability. If there's any sort of compliance things that are related to the software, data privacy, payments, going back to that early point. If you don't have confidence in its maintainability, either by you or the person that's building it, uh, is it, and again, if you're just like, I'm trying to replace a SaaS software, I'd really look closely and be like, you know, who's likely to be here in 5 years? Them or me or the builder who's building the software? And can I build as quickly as they can build? And as you go down the path of adding more capabilities, who's going to do a better job?
That's a really good thing to think about. I like that. So if you had to build a framework for deciding pros and cons, walk us through what that would look like. What would the matrix look like for that?
Okay. This will kind of be a recap of what I just talked about. Does it touch sensitive data? Buy. Is there SaaS software that is cheaper than what you're going to do? Buy. Um, what is the technical continuity? As in, now that can be an interesting thing because a lot of startups might not be here in 5 years. So if you have a lot of confidence in your builder being around, maybe build. How much is it going to change? How much support is it going to be? Is it a simple tool that's not going to need a lot of support? I could argue build. If there's a ton of complexity, if I'm building on APIs that are constantly changing, you may want to buy. How core is this to your operation? Now, here's the other, this is a really good one. If this software goes down, what does that do to your business? And
That's a really good point.
you know, who's picking up the call from the team? You know, that 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 should give some pause how critical it is. Now, this is something that you can consider as you're working with software vendors. Like, how good is their support? This is something I'd always look at with a software vendor. What's their reputation for support? How do you get support? Um, Because if it's really critical to your business, you want to be able to connect with them. Now, unfortunately, the software industry has moved away from phone-based support because it's expensive to
Yeah.
a lot of chat agents. But still, is there some way to get a hold of somebody and to escalate? And the more critical the software, the more timely the support is needed. So that's what I think about. What is the criticality of this software? If it stops working, what does that how does that impact the business? If this stops orders and sales, and let's say you've got Joe developer, he's on board, you've locked him up, you've got really good salary. Joe's on vacation. Maybe he's on a backpacking trip. Nobody can reach him. What happens then? So I don't know. I might be coming off as a little bit of pessimistic towards vibe coding solutions, probably because I built a crap load of software and I've dealt with all these issues.
Yeah.
That said, we have built tools internally here at Ledger Gurus. There is this nervousness that I have. But a lot of those tools I'm building because nobody else is building those things.
Yeah.
I've seen a need that nobody else is solving, and so I've been okay going down that path. And so, as people are going down the path of build versus buy, I think they need to think about all these considerations because you can easily make a bad decision. Now, do you want to hear what I think is going to happen in the next few years?
I always wanna hear what you think's gonna happen.
I think you're gonna see a lot of people that will vibe code apps and will probably reverse course and go back to paid software.
I agree.
Now, the bigger thing I think people should be thinking about is not should I be building my own or buying? I think the question is now, what am I buying? I think the vendors that we're using today are either going to have to level up, or you're going to see a new class of software vendors that will emerge that are AI native, that are able to build faster, that are able to use AI features more effectively. And that's probably the next generation of software. And in my career, I've seen software evolution. When I started, if I go way back before I even got into working in software, but you and I, we started on DOS and
Yeah.
command line software, and then it moved to Windows, and then we moved to internet based software, and then, okay, I just had a brain fart. And then we moved to mobile, right? Okay, now I just need to now I not only need to be able to do my software from a browser, but I also want to be able to do it from a mobile app, and I need to be able the software's the same. And now we're in this age of AI where it is AI features and capabilities. And each evolution, you'll see a lot of changes in who are the dominant players. It's often the newer players of software that overtake the older ones. It's the classic innovator's dilemma.
Yeah.
Occasionally, you'll see legacy vendors that are able to make the leap. That's super hard to do. So, in my mind, I would be advising, don't spend as much time thinking about what you can build by yourself, and think about what vendors are building the next generation of software and look at them.
That's great. I love that. So, Stephen, what are your final words of advice?
I would just go through that framework. I'd be cautious about what you're building. I would be very much looking at next generation software, keeping a close eye on that, building where there's gaps, making sure that it's supportable, sustainable. Um, Go hate me. I know all the talking heads are telling you all to build your own software. I would just say, as somebody who spent 2 decades in software, who lived through the web, the mobile, cloud revolution, um, that there's a lot to consider. I wouldn't say don't do it, just do it wisely.
All right. You heard it here, folks.
All right, we'll call that a wrap. Thanks for joining me again, Stacy.
Thanks, Stephen.
Today's episode is brought to you by Ledger Gurus, your partner in mastering cost of goods sold and inventory accounting. Do you trust your cost of goods sold number? At Ledger Gurus, we specialize in helping e-commerce businesses bridge the gap between inventory operations and accurate financials, giving you numbers you can trust so you can make data-driven decisions. Head over to ledgergurus.com and learn how we can help you take control of your inventory and numbers today. That's LEDGERGURUS.com.